Welcome to Fun with History with Professor Banks. And today we are going to be on lesson number 13. And today the lesson is called The Age of Discovery. So I hope you're intrigued. It's going to be a good one. Come right back. Welcome to Fun with History with Professor Banks. And today our lesson is The Age of Discovery. And what we are going to be looking at mostly today, if you remember last week, it was on the Renaissance, which was generally speaking the 1300s to the 1500s. Today we're going to be mostly in the 1400s as we cover this exciting age, because this exciting age opens us up to places outside of Europe. So we are now going to be traveling across the ocean for the first time. So the Age of Discovery. But before we start, of course, let us share the joke of the week. And so I got this joke of the week for you, and I hope you enjoy it. Okay. Here's the joke of the week. A man decided that he was going to ride a 10-speed bike from Phoenix to Flagstaff. Okay, so that's in Arizona. He got as far as Black Canyon City before the mountains just became too much and he could go no further. He stuck his thumb out to get a ride, but after 3 hours he hadn't got a single person to stop. Finally, a guy in a Corvette pulled over and offered him a ride. Of course, the bike didn't fit in the car. The owner of the Corvette found a piece of rope lying by the highway and tied it to his bumper. He tied the other end to the bike and told the man that if he got going too fast to honk the horn on his bike and he would slow down. So you get that? He's going to tie him up behind his car and he's going to pull him behind his vehicle. Everything went fine for the first 30 minutes. Suddenly, another Corvette blew right past him. Not to be outdone, the Corvette pulling the bike took off after the other Corvette. A short distance down the road, the Corvettes, both going well over 120 miles per hour, blew through a speed trap. The police officer noted the speeds from his radar gun and radioed to the other officer that he had two Corvettes headed his way at over 120 miles per hour. He then relayed, and you're not going to believe this, but there's a guy on a 10-speed bike honking to pass. Hopefully you enjoyed that a little bit. It was kind of I think more of a corny joke, but it is kind of a little bit of a laugher to get us going here this morning on our holiday here in Canada, Victoria Day. So happy Victoria Day to all of you who are Canadians. Hope you're enjoying your holiday. So anyway, the Age of Discovery. So what I'm going to do with you today is I'm going to share with you very in a nutshell, and this is actually from a class I took in college, so I summarized it well in my notes, and I'm just going to share that with you. And then I'm going to actually share a couple of things at the end. And I'm going to share about a top secret. Okay, so there's actually a top secret about the Age of Discovery that maybe not everybody is aware of. So here we go, the Age of Discovery. So what's happening in the Age of Discovery here in the 1400s? It's lots of things are developing and lots of things are occurring on the world scene in order to start this Age of Discovery. So things are coming into play in different areas, and So it's enabling people to start looking into other parts of the world. And again, last week I talked about the Renaissance, and I mentioned about gold, God, and glory. So this is the gold part, okay? So people are starting to think there's uncharted territory out there, and they think that some of these territories are just very, very rich, and they want to try to conquest it. So, and I also want to make a note. I'll make a note on my last video. I incorrectly gave an incorrect date on my last video on the Renaissance. The invention of the printing press, I said it was invented in 1950. And of course, we're talking about the 1300s to 1500s, so that wouldn't make any sense at all. It was 1450, not 1950, okay? So 1450 was the invention of the printing press. Just to clarify that little mistake your professor made. Okay, so I've broken it down here. What I'm going to do is look, first of all, at the political part of things. And you can see a bunch of dates on there that I'm going to cover. 1450, 1487, 1500, 1505, and then a couple of other things that happened in 1453 and 1455. Okay, so let me summarize this very quickly. So what was happening on the political scene in this day of age? In the 15th century, Isabella and Ferdinand consolidated their many kingdoms to achieve a more united Spain. Okay, Spain first and foremost. And Isabella and Ferdinand were high up people in the nation of Spain at the time. The Spanish monarchy was very strong, and because of this, they became the key to expansion as they could afford the cost of exploration. But Portugal is also very significant in European expansion as they sought to obtain greatness in the overseas world. In 1415, Portugal took over a city in Morocco and officially began the European exploration. Under the reign of King John II, Portugal established trading posts and forts on the Guinea coast and began to penetrate into Timbuktu, Africa. At this point, they had gained control over the flow of gold that came into Europe. So Portugal, very, very key, as was Spain. And in a second, I'm going to show you a map that kind of shows you where they are on the map and where Morocco was, to give you an idea. In 1487, Bartholomew Diaz, so he was a very rich man, had the ability to explore. He reached the Cape of Good Hope. And on April 22nd, 1500, Portugal discovered the coast of Brazil, and Commander Cabral reaches India around the same time. Around 1505, Portugal again takes more action and blasts Muslim forts situated around the Indian Ocean, and thus laid the foundation for yet more European expansion and exploration. So that is why Portugal and Spain are the key people in this European expansion, and they were at this time nations in Europe, as many nations were starting to really come into their own in Europe at this time. And let me show you a map here. Okay, this is actually an old map I showed you once before. It's a map of the Roman Empire. But on this map, you can see ancient Portugal and Spain. So they weren't Portugal and Spain at the time, but they are at this point. Okay, so let me show you here. I'm going to make sure I put my finger on it. Okay, so right there is Portugal and Spain, and you can see Italy over on the side there, and you can see that is the Mediterranean Sea. That you can see those islands that were part of Rome. So this is Portugal and Spain, and if you go further down where the purple is, see the purple right underneath it, that is the tip of Africa. So that was North Africa, and at that time that was Morocco. So that is where they started to really begin their exploration. That's their first steps, as you could say, as they started to go into Africa and gain control over Morocco. So that is what happened on that front, okay? So that is Portugal and Spain for you, and they were pretty strong, wealthy nations, and that they had the ability to do this exploration. And now technological developments. This was very key as well because of the technology that was starting to be formed to allow this kind of exploration to happen. But first and foremost, let me talk about a couple other things in the political era. Okay? 1453. What happened in 1453? It was the official end to the Byzantine Empire. And as you recall, the Byzantine Empire was the half of the Roman Empire that actually survived after the fall of the Roman Empire, and it was the one that continued to thrive for years. A good 1,000 years that it was around, the Byzantine Empire. But in 1453, the Byzantine Empire was no more. It was captured by an empire that was rising up pretty powerful called the Ottoman Empire. And the Ottoman Empire basically captured Constantinople, and now the Byzantine Empire is no more. 1455, I want to talk about a war that happened. Okay?
Hey! I'm nicer than you are.
No, you're nicer.
Hey! I'm more nicer. I'm bigger.
The War of the Roses. The War of the Roses. Now, I was just making a very funny illustration here about the War of the Roses, but it wasn't actually a literal war between roses. But what it was... Excuse me, I need to find all my notes here. So the War of the Roses was prominent in England, and what was happening with the War of the Roses in 1455 was it was a war between thrones in England, okay? So it was actually between the rival houses Lancaster and York, and they were fighting, and their throne was being fought back and passed back and forth between the two of them to see who would actually have the throne in England. Okay, so that was what the War of the Roses was about. And in this process, a great amount of aristocracy was killed off as well. Okay, so that was one of the result of that war. The aristocracy was killed off. I don't think I'm saying that right, but aristocracy. It's a big word. I can't say it right. But anyway, that was what the War of the Roses was about. Okay, let me tell you about the technological developments as well. So this was key, technological developments. Okay, so what was happening was cannon guns were now invented that had the ability to shoot iron and stone balls. Cannons were now on ships as well. And the ships themselves were very strongly made now. So they now had really strong made ships that was strong enough to handle the waters of the Atlantic Ocean and strong enough to sail them, which was very, very key for them to sail the waters and find uncharted territory. They had magnetic compasses, okay, so that was very key because the sailors could then determine their sea position with the compasses, and they had this technology called astrolabes, which what enabled them to figure, it basically allowed them to see the distance that they were at and the depths of the sea they were on as well. So all these technological advances were very important because it was enabling this age of expansion and discovery to actually start to happen. Okay, so that was another thing that was happening. And then varied motives. Okay, that's the third one, varied motives, and let me share with you very briefly what that means, varied motives. Many explorers had a desire to Christianize Muslims and pagan peoples. As they began to Christianize Muslims, they realized this would be a very difficult task, so they began to travel to Africa and beyond. So by beyond, I mean they went into the waters of the Atlantic, and they eventually came across America. Woo! America! North America. 2. Many explorers had a desire and ambition to find great financial fortune, so they traveled to America on the quest for money and fortune. 3. Many of the explorers were sponsored by governments and were encouraged by people to travel. 4. Many of the explorers desired to know more about the geography and the peoples of the world. And 5th, spices. Spices was key too, because there was a lot of money in spices at this time. Like if you got your hands on spices, you could sell it and make pretty good money on it. So spices were shipped to many different parts of the world, and explorers would take the time and resources to travel these areas to get a hold of these spices. Okay? So that was what was happening on that front. Okay, so you had the political developments that were happening, the coming into power and very strong power of Portugal and Spain. You had the technological advancements that were making it very easy for them to be able to get into the ocean, travel, and find uncharted territory. And then you had the varied motives that we just discussed as well. Okay, so what I want to talk about finally is a little treaty that happened, and as well as a little top secret information. Top secret. Okay? Top secret information. So the years I'm looking at with this is 1492 and 1494. So first of all, 1492. 1492. In 1492, a very popular man. Who here has heard of a man whose initials were CC? Anybody know who I'm talking about?
Professor over here. Professor, I think I know.
Yeah? Christopher Columbus. Christopher Columbus. You nailed it. Christopher Columbus, yes. So Christopher Columbus, as many people are aware of, in 1492, this was Spain. So Spain actually funded Christopher Columbus, okay, to sail on their behalf. And Christopher Columbus did sail, travel, and he found America. And he actually, they had a little nice ceremony, like had a little ground digging ceremony and officially declared America discovered. But what many people don't know, top secret information coming your way here, so listen up. What people don't know is that actually the Vikings, okay, so everybody remember about the Vikings? The Vikings were part of the Middle Ages. The Vikings had actually previously voyaged across the Atlantic in the 9th and 10th centuries and had discovered Greenland and the eastern coast of North America. So it's actually the Vikings that first came across North America and not really Christopher Columbus. But everybody associates Christopher Columbus with actually America. So, I guess, he has a place in history for sure, Christopher Columbus, but it was actually the Vikings. Who discovered the very coast of North America. So there's something maybe I didn't know. You learn something new every day, right? And that's something new. So anyway, that is a little bit of what was going on. And as well, I might want to add another big thing that was going on in this time period that wasn't very cool, not very cool, was a lot of enslaving of African blacks, okay? So we talked about the Portugals going into Africa and starting their exploration there. The only place now The problem was after Constantinople was conquered by the Ottoman Empire, they couldn't really, white slaves weren't as accessible. So therefore, the only place that really was able to happen now to recruit slaves was Africa, and Africa obviously did not have a lot of white people. In the midst of the European expansion, a demand for sugar began to increase, and the Europeans began to enslave the African blacks and transport them to sugar plantations in Madeira, Azores, and the Cape Verde Islands in Brazil to obtain some sugar cane. In the New World of America, Europeans faced the problem of having too few workers, hence this is also why the Europeans began to enslave African blacks. In addition, African blacks were specifically enslaved because church law did not forbid black slavery at this time, and that's a little bit of a blurb on the slavery. Not a good thing. Slavery is not a good thing, and thank goodness that in this day of age we see a lot less of that now. We don't see that that kind of going on anymore. But that was another thing that was happening as part of this European exploration as well. Was a big part of it was the enslaving of these blacks, which got better in time. So anyway, that is the age of discovery for you. I tried to make it brief and tried to make it understandable at the same time. Now, what happened with Spain and Portugal? Obviously, you got two countries here that are fighting, or not fighting, but two countries that are trying to do the same thing, and that is explore and get their hands on uncharted territory. So there must have been something that kind of came heads to head with that at some point, and they did kind of have a lot of conflict. And what happened in 1494? 1494. Was something called a treaty. Okay, so in 1494, these two countries thought maybe we can come up with some kind of treaty that would make this more fairer. So they came up with the Treaty of Tordesillas. The Treaty of Tordesillas. Okay, so it was like, here, I like a torticilla that has lots of spicy food on it. Lots of spice. Lots of just really spice. I don't like a torticilla like that. I like it more mild. I just like the meat on it. And like, okay, I'll give you this torticilla then. You can have that torticilla. No. That's not what the treaty was about. Essentially, the treaty was called the Treaty of Tordesillas, but what was the key to the treaty was the European colonies would be split up in the New World. So what happened was they came to an understanding like this. Spain would get America and lots of gold and silver. Portugal was happy to get Brazil, India, and Asia, and as a result, spices and sugar, which had a lot of value too, and it was Portugal that decided to enslave the many Africans. So that was part of the treaty too. Okay, so Spain, you have America. Okay, you just go nuts with America. We, on the other hand, we like the sugar cane. So we're going to focus on Brazil, India, and Asia, get the spices and sugar, and we're going to use those African people to help us in that way. So that was what the Treaty of Tordesillas was about. But anyway, I wanted to add a little humor to the Treaty of Tordesillas. It's kind of a funny name. So anyway, that is what I want to share with you today. That is the essence of the lesson today. So, America is discovered, in quotation marks, because the Vikings were actually the ones that discovered it, but full, real discovery of America, you could say, because they found the U.S. and they found all the other parts of North America. And Portugal and Spain are kind of the powers at this time in this world that we are in. So next week, we are going to get into another time period that talks more about faith and religion. Okay, so that is going to be next week. And next week is going to be really, really great because we're going to have a very special dramatic presentation. Okay, so stay tuned for that. Hold on to that because just telling you right now, there's going to be a pretty special dramatic presentation that hopefully will go over well. But that was the Age of Discovery. So I hope you enjoyed this lesson. And next week, we are going to get into a time period shaped up very importantly by religion. Okay? So that is next week. But until next week, take care. And this is Professor Banks signing off.